The purpose of a bell mouth compressor inlet is to maximize the aerodynamic efficiency of the inlet. The bell mouth is used to measure inlet pressures, and the actual diameter of the bell mouth is critical to measuring the engine's parameters. The curved area at the inlet is to make the inside diameter as close to 100% effective as possible. What is used to drive a supercharger? Gear train from the crankshaft. Superchargers must first boost the manifold pressure above approximately 30 inches mercury to be considered a true supercharger. Normally, superchargers are engine-driven through the accessory case by gears. What is the purpose of a turbocharger system for a small reciprocating aircraft engine? Compresses air to maintain manifold pressure constant from sea level to a critical altitude of the engine. This type of system normalizes the air entering the engine. This system compensates for altitude and does not work above 30 inches mercury. Its main purpose is to regain manifold pressure lost because of increases in altitude. When starting an engine equipped with a carburetor air heater, in what position should the heater be placed? Cold. The normal starting position for the carburetor heater is in the cold position. What is the purpose of the rate of change controller in a turbocharger system? Controls the rate at which the turbocharger discharge pressure will increase. This controller in a turbocharger system controls the rate at which the discharge pressure increases. This controller monitors the rate at which the upper deck pressure increases. If it surpasses a certain limit, it will off-seat and bypass control oil pressure. This will open the wastegate and slow down the turbine. What methods are used to provide clean air to the engines of helicopters and turboprop airplanes that have particle, sand, and ice separators installed? Sharp airflow directional change to take advantage of inertia and or centrifugal force, and filters or engine inlet screens. Practical separators and filters and screens are used to provide for clean air into the engine. The particles or ice are diverted by their own weight away from the engine when using directional changes to clean the inlet air. Bootstrapping of a turbocharged engine is indicated by a transient increase in engine power. It is a turbocharger's instability resulting in uncommanded drift or transient increases or decreases in power. What are the three basic regulating components of a sea-level boosted turbocharger system? Exhaust bypass assembly, density controller, and differential pressure controller. As manifold pressure increases in a reciprocating engine, the density of air in the cylinder increases. Since the manifold pressure is absolute values, the density of the air is measured and would increase. What part of an aircraft in flight will begin to accumulate ice before any other? The carburetor. The carburetor venturi is subjected to increased velocity air, which decreases the temperature and latent heat of evaporation, cooling the area. Between these factors working in the carburetor, ice can form at outside temperatures well above freezing. Carburetor icing on an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller can be detected by a decrease in manifold pressure with a constant RPM. The engine RPM will stay the same, compensated for by the propeller pitch change. The manifold pressure will decrease slightly because of the restriction of the ice that's formed in the induction system of the engine. Carburetor icing is most severe at air temperatures between 30 degrees and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. At temperatures from 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with any humidity, the area of the carburetor will be below freezing and any moisture in this area will freeze. A method commonly used to prevent carburetor icing is to preheat the intake air. The carburetor heat, preheated air, is applied to the induction system to raise the air temperature in the venturi above freezing to prevent carburetor ice. Which of the following would be a factor in the failure of an engine to develop full power at takeoff? Improper adjustment of carburetor heat valve control linkage. If the carburetor heat is leaking during full power, the valve should be in the off position. Less dense air will reduce the power the engine can produce. If a fire starts in the induction system during the engine starting procedure, what should the operator do? Continue cranking the engine. Continue cranking the engine as it starts. It will pull the fire into the induction system. The vortex dissipators installed on some turbine-powered aircraft to prevent engine FOD utilizes a stream of engine bleed air blown toward the ground ahead of the engine. In addition to causing accelerated wear, dust or sand ingested by a reciprocating engine may also cause silicone fouling of spark plugs. Silicone fouling of the spark plugs causes high RPM, missing of the engine. At high temperatures, the silicone will coat the firing tip of the spark plug and become conductive, which can make the spark plug inoperative. When an engine with a subsonic divergent type inlet duct is running in place at high speed on the ground, the air pressure within the inlet is positive. As the air enters the divergent duct, the velocity decreases and the pressure increases, so there's a slight positive pressure. The action of a carburetor air scoop is to supply air to the carburetor, but it may also increase the pressure of the incoming air by ram effect. By collecting the air and with forward velocity, the air scoop can increase the pressure of the inlet air, ram effect. The air molecules are packed in the air scoop and provide a small supercharging effect. Vortex dissipator systems are generally activated by a landing gear switch. Carburetor icing on an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller can be detected by a decrease in manifold pressure with a constant RPM. As ice restricts the airflow into the engine on aircraft with constant speed propellers, a drop in manifold pressure will be seen while the RPM remains constant. The constant speed propeller holds the RPM steady. An increase in manifold pressure when carburetor heat is applied indicates ice was forming in the carburetor. An increase in manifold pressure when the carburetor heat is applied is a sign that carburetor ice had been forming and has been melted by the heat. Carburetor icing is most severe at air temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. During full power output of an unsupercharged engine equipped with a float-type carburetor, in which of the following areas will be the highest pressure exist? The carburetor air scoop. The venturi and the intake manifold have pressures that are less than ambient. The carburetor intake opening has pressure that is higher than ambient. If the turbocharger wastegate is completely closed, all the exhaust gases are directed through the turbine. Boost manifold pressure is generally considered to be any manifold pressure above 30 inches mercury. What is the purpose of the density controller in a turbocharger system? Limits the maximum manifold pressure that can be produced by the turbocharger at full throttle. The density controller limits the maximum manifold pressure that can be developed at full throttle. What directly regulates the speed of a turbocharger? The wastegate. The wastegate determines the amount of exhaust gases that flow through the turbine of the turbocharger, thus regulating the speed. The differential pressure controller in a turbocharger system reduces bootstrapping during part throttle operation. The differential pressure controller in a turbocharger system prevents bootstrapping or continual drift of the manifold pressure during partial throttle operations. The purpose of an engine inlet anti-ice system is primarily to prevent ice formation in the engine or inlet areas. Engine inlet anti-ice systems on turbine aircraft prevent the formation of ice on turbine inlet areas. The formation of ice in these areas could cause catastrophic damage to the engine if the ice breaks off and goes through the turbine. If carburetor or induction system icing is not present when carburetor heat is applied, with no change in the throttle setting, the mixture will become richer. If no carburetor ice is present when the carburetor heat is applied, the engine mixture will become richer, causing a decrease in power. The application of carburetor heat during engine operation will decrease the weight of the fuel-air charge. Carburetor heat will cause a decrease in weight to the fuel-air mixture going through the carburetor because heated air is less dense than cold air. This will cause a decrease in power from the engine. The application of carburetor heat will have which of the following effects? The mixture will become richer. Carburetor heat will cause the fuel-air mixture to become richer. Carburetor heat will cause a decrease in the weight to the fuel-air mixture going through the carburetor because heated air is less dense than cold air. This will cause a decrease in power from the engine. When operating an engine, the application of carburetor heat will have what effect on the fuel-air mixture? Enriching the mixture until the AMC can make a compensation. The mixture will become richer until the automatic mixture control, AMC, compensates. A carburetor air preheater is not generally used on takeoff unless absolutely necessary because of the loss of power and possible detonation. Carburetor heat is not normally used during takeoff unless absolutely necessary due to the loss of power and possible detonation that may occur if used when not necessary. What is the effect on engine performance when induction system icing occurs? The engine will lose power, the operation will be erratic and rough. When is carburetor throttle ice likely to form? It forms during part throttle operation, when the throttle is near the closed position, as well as when the outside air temperature is low and the humidity is high. It also forms at close temperature / dew point spread. What regulates the amount of exhaust gases that drive the turbine of the turbocharger? The wastegate controls the amount of exhaust gas directed to the turbine. What may be the indication of an induction system obstruction? The engine fails to start, is difficult to start, and/or the power is low. A malfunction of the wastegate or turbocharger controller can cause what type of engine problems? Wastegate or controller malfunction can cause the engine to surge, not develop rated power to altitude, or overboost on takeoff.